Welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping right into a hidden problem-solving matrix known as TRIZ. We're going to see exactly how the most brilliant minds on the planet look at an utterly impossible problem, flat out refuse to compromise, and instead completely rewrite the rules of what's possible. Okay, let's kick things off with a pretty bizarre lineup. On the surface, a thermos keeping your tea hot, an LED lighting your living room, a folding phone in your pocket, and life-saving heart surgery seem to have absolutely nothing in common. But there is actually a single invisible signature of problem-solving that connects every single one of them. Well, most of us are wired to think that inventing, or really just designing anything, is about finding the perfect compromise, right? You want something stronger? Okay, it has to be heavier. You want it brighter? It's going to use more power. You accept the trade-off. But true innovators, they completely reject that trade-off. They don't want a lukewarm balance between two bad options. They want all the benefits with absolutely zero drawbacks. Let's start with a super familiar one, your morning thermos. You pour coffee in at 7 a.m. and it is literally still steaming at 5 p.m., even though the wall of the flask is less than a finger thick. Now, human intuition tells us insulation requires thickness. If you're cold, you put on a massive puffy coat. So how on earth you get all-day insulation out of just a millimeter of material? What's really fascinating here is that the inventor didn't just blindly add thicker padding. That's the compromise way. Instead, they broke the problem down into the three distinct ways heat actually escapes. Conduction, which is heat moving from solid to solid, convection, heat moving through the air, and radiation, heat emitting in waves, almost like light. And here is how they completely solved the contradiction without adding an inch of bulk. By extracting matter to create a vacuum, you stop conduction dead in its tracks, simply because there's no matter left for the heat to travel through. To stop convection, you trap air in porous structures, sometimes using aerogel, which is literally known as frozen smoke. And for radiation, a micro-thin reflective film bounces those heat waves right back inside. Boom! Problem solved. We didn't add thickness. We just systematically shut down each path of escape. All right, moving from your kitchen out to the global energy grid, we hit our second contradiction with the old incandescent light bulb. Think about it. If you put your hand near an old bulb, it burns you. But if you touch a modern LED, it's completely cool. This forces us to ask a pretty profound question about efficiency. How much energy pumped into a traditional bulb actually becomes light, and how much is just totally wasted? Here's the crazy part. A traditional incandescent bulb's light is basically just a happy accident, a byproduct of making a physical wire incredibly hot. You run electricity through a filament until it burns so hot that it glows. And incredibly, this process wastes a staggering 90% of its energy as heat. The harmful byproduct is literally baked right into the design. So, to solve this contradiction and save massive amounts of global energy, the inventor had to figure out how to extract the useful function, which is the light, without generating the harmful byproduct of the heat. They had to ask, is it actually possible to bypass the heating phase entirely and just get the glow? Enter the LED. By using what TRIZ calls Principle 35, parameter change, the inventors completely changed the state of the system. They moved away from a burning physical wire to a semiconductor, directly converting electricity into light, absolutely no heating phase required. This relentless pursuit of light without heat led straight to the Nobel Prize-winning blue LED, completely revolutionizing global energy consumption. We got much brighter light using a tiny fraction of the power. Now, let's bring this right to the text sitting in your pocket. It is the classic consumer contradiction. You obviously want a massive screen to watch your favorite shows, but it still has to physically fit inside your pocket or a small bag. And for the longest time, that meant choosing between squinting at a tiny screen or lugging around a heavy laptop. For decades, we just accepted that trade-off. But why? Mostly because of a completely false assumption. We assumed screens had to be rigid, fragile pieces of glass. But was rigid glass a strict law of physics, or was it just a habit of manufacturing? To truly solve the contradiction, innovators had to completely rethink the physical nature of the screen itself. Look at how beautifully this tracks the TRIZ principle of dynamization. Technology naturally evolves from rigid to flexible. We went from dividing and hinging screens on old flip phones and laptops to using flexible organic materials for folding OLED screens that literally fold in half. And following this exact same predictable path, we are eventually going to move towards screenless projections, freeing ourselves from physical material entirely. Okay, now the stakes get significantly higher in our final case study, life or death surgery. A doctor has to get inside the human body to clear a blocked artery or fix an organ. But cutting a patient open with a massive incision causes immense trauma, brutally long recovery times, and a super high risk of infection. Historically, the medical world compromised with a pretty brutal phrase: if necessary, we cut. The widely accepted trade-off was that great surgical access required great patient damage. But modern medicine, it completely refuses that trade-off. Innovators started asking, how do we go in, do major restorative work, and leave absolutely no trace on the outside? And this is where the magic really happens. Think back to those folding phones we just talked about. Using that exact same TRIZ principle of dynamization, medical stents are now designed to fold up incredibly small so they can travel harmlessly through a tiny vein. They dynamically expand only when they actually reach the blocked artery in the heart. It's minimal damage on the way in, but maximum access once they arrive.
Reaching the absolute peak of innovation, we completely eliminate the physical tool. Take kidney stones, for instance. Instead of cutting a patient open, doctors use Principle 28, mechanic substitution. They beam concentrated sound waves from the outside to break the stones apart on the inside. The tool literally becomes invisible energy. It is the ultimate ideal surgery, one where the surgeon never even makes a cut. So as we pull all these threads together, the hidden matrix behind these highly patented, billion-dollar innovations becomes super clear. Whether it's a thermos, a light bulb, a smartphone, or a surgical technique, they are not random strokes of genius. They all follow the exact same predictable patterns of problem solving. They identify the contradiction, break the rigid assumptions, eliminate the harmful byproducts, and substitute physical mechanics for smarter systems. Whether you're trying to save space in your living room, extend the battery life of a gadget, or literally save a human life in an operating room, the grand takeaway of this explainer is incredibly simple. Refuse to compromise. Find the underlying contradiction and resolve it entirely. I want you to take this specific mindset into your week. Look around your home, your workplace, and your projects. What trade-off have you been accepting simply because it's always been done that way? What rigid assumption can you finally eliminate? What impossible contradiction are you going to solve next? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.